Hello, today we're going to talk about sentence structure and types. You'll remember that a sentence has two basic parts. It has a subject, and the subject is made up of the noun part. It tells you who or what the sentence is about. A sentence also has a predicate, and the predicate is made up of the verb part. It's the part that contains the verb. And this tells you what the subject is or is doing. So let's start out with the subject. Let's start out with Mr. Buck. There he is. And then let's add a predicate. Let's add is a PE teacher. Mr. Buck is a PE teacher. So you put the subject and the predicate together and you get a sentence. This sentence just tells us what Mr. Buck is. Mr. Buck isn't actually doing anything here. And it's a simple sentence. So let's take another subject. Or maybe let's just stay with the same subject, Mr. Buck. So let's add another predicate. And this time we're going to add an action predicate, is running. So let's take a look at the simple sentence, Mr. Buck is running. And here we see Mr. Buck is running. Now let's take a look at a compound subject. A compound subject means that there's more than one subject. And so we're going to look at Mr. Buck and Ms. Martin. So let's add a predicate to our compound subject. Teach 6th grade. So we now have Mr. Buck and Ms. Martin teach 6th grade. This is a simple sentence with a compound subject. And of course, if we can have a compound subject, we can also have a compound predicate. So let's look at the predicate talks and types. Using the predicate talks and types, we'll add a subject and see an example. Here is Ms. Martin. Ms. Martin talks and types. Ms. Martin is the subject. She's doing two things. Talks and types. Now that you understand the concept of compound subjects and compound predicates, let's talk about compound sentences. A compound sentence is actually two sentences, but the two sentences are connected by a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or by a semicolon. What are coordinating conjunctions? Coordinating conjunctions are and, or, but, so, and yet. So let's take a look at an example of a compound sentence. Ms. Martin is a terrible dancer, and Mr. Buck is shocked. So you have two simple sentences with the coordinating conjunction and a comma. Ms. Martin is a terrible dancer, and Mr. Buck is shocked. Now, here's something to keep in mind. A sentence is a clause, but not all clauses are sentences. What do I mean by that? Well, a clause is not this, and a clause is not this. When we are talking about clauses in grammar, we are talking about a group of words that has a subject and a verb, and they're different types of clauses. For example, we have independent clauses. Independent clauses are just that. Independent clauses can stand on their own. A simple sentence is an independent clause, and a compound sentence is two independent clauses joined together. But then we also have dependent clauses. Dependent clauses cannot stand on their own, and they are put together with subordinating conjunctions or relative pronouns. Now, in order to make up a complex sentence, you have to have an independent clause and a dependent clause. So let's see how we would do this. First of all, we're going to talk about identifying dependent clauses that have subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating conjunctions, it's a complicated word, but the word itself is actually easy. Subordinating conjunctions are after, although, because, before, since, though, unless, until. Those are the common subordinating conjunctions. So let's look at a complex sentence that starts out with a subordinating conjunction of, although he ran as fast as he could. So as you saw from the film, we have two different types of complex sentences made up with the same dependent clause. We have, although he ran as fast as he could, Mr. Buck was hit by the missile, and Mr. Buck was hit by the missile, although he ran as fast as he could. When you start a complex sentence with a dependent clause, you have to set it off by a comma. But when you end a complex sentence with a dependent clause, most times you don't have to set it off by the comma. So dependent clauses are also made up of relative pronouns. Relative pronouns are who, whom, whose, that, and which. These are the main relative pronouns. The relative pronoun acts as the dependent part of the clause. Let's look at an example. Mr. Buck is shocked that Miss Martin is such a terrible dancer. That Miss Martin is such a terrible dancer is the dependent clause in this complex sentence. So there you have it. You now know how to correctly structure and create three types of sentences: simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. Using all three of these different types of sentences will help make your writing more interesting. See you in class!